A dismal end to the financial year as the local market disappoints. There was nearly 500,000 job vacancies in May, with businesses crying out for workers. And happy 30th birthday, superannuation. It's Friday, the 1st of July, 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Adam Lang.
Good morning, Michael, and happy new financial year. I hope it is an excellent one for you, your family, and all of our listeners.
Well, Adam, same to you. I just hope that it is better than the one we've just finished because, as we will discuss in a minute, that's a pretty ordinary year.
Yeah, that was a bit of a kick in the shins, wasn't it?
Yeah, certainly was. And look, we'll get to that in a moment, but I want to mention the interview that you have coming up after the show. You're speaking to Daniel Hakim, who's the CEO and founder of the Club of United Business.
Yes, Michael, Daniel is taking a new approach to business clubs, moving beyond the old world of men only into a broad-based membership. It's a really interesting business model, and I think it's a really interesting chat.
Yeah, no, it is a good one. We'll have a bit more of a chat about it later on. But the main story this morning, Adam, is, of course, the very ordinary performance of markets over the last year. When we last spoke to our colleague, Sean Aylmer, who was back Monday, by the way, he said, and I quote, "What's remarkable is what a crap year it's been. Let's get rid of financial year 2022. And after yesterday's awful finish, Adam, I don't think there's many that would argue with him.
No, and especially when you compare it with the previous financial year when the S&P ASX 200 ended up 24%. Now, that was the best performance in more than 3 decades. I suppose it was too much to hope for that this trend would continue, and it didn't. In the financial year just finished yesterday, the ASX 200 lost 10.2%.
Yeah, it's been a very, very bumpy ride, especially in the last 6 months, losing 12.6%. And the list of factors, if we're looking for a reason to blame here, it's pretty wide-ranging. In the last year, we've had the war in Ukraine, inflation spike, interest rates climbing here and overseas, the ongoing fallout from COVID, lockdowns ending, borders reopening, kind of the list goes on.
Those factors haven't just affected us, Michael. Almost every country has been dealing with a similar combination. We also had a change of government, but remarkably, amongst those other factors, it probably ranks lower in significance.
It's not often that you can say that, is it?
No, never.
Now, we'll run through some of the winners and losers here. Just a quick little guide. The biggest loser was the tech sector, down 38% across the last year. We've talked about this many times in recent months. The sector really kind of came off the boil as life returned to normal post-COVID and inflation fears picked up. Consumer discretionary was next, off 22%. Perfect example of this is JB Hi-Fi, which fell 24% over the last year, which is neatly in line with the rest of the sector, reflecting really our changing buying behaviour post-lockdowns.
The banks have come off 11% during the last 12 months. Commonwealth Bank, the biggest, closed yesterday at $90.38, and that was down from its peak in November of $110.38. So that's $20 off. And that was really based on concerns about margin pressure and the risk of bad debts as rates rise. But while the story overall is pretty dismal, there are a couple of sectors that have well and truly outperformed. Utilities are up 30% and energy stocks have climbed 25%. A lot of this is due to the war in Ukraine, soaring demand and prices for oil, gas and coal. Also, as we transition to renewable energy, we're seeing that reflected at home in our power bills, companies like AGL and Origin.
All right, Adam, the big question is, and the one that I think we're all kind of hanging out for, so whip your crystal ball out.
Okay.
Are we going to see more of the same?
Well, on a global scale, Australia's been relatively lucky. We have mineral wealth, exports, and a competitive exchange rate. Now, supply chain disruptions and record low unemployment figures have turned into inflationary pressure, which leads to uncertainty. Just how much interest rates will have to rise to bring inflation under control is the big question, and that's what's supporting the uncertainty now.
Adam, it's probably as good a time as any to remind people that we are not obviously an investment podcast, and the best thing you can do is speak to a professional to get advice before you make any investment decisions. And just to wrap up our wrap, really, of the last financial year, gold has been pretty stable over the last year. On the other hand, crypto has been anything but.
Yes, Bitcoin has had a shocker. It's down more than 40% over the last financial year, and in the last 24 hours, dipped back below US $20,000. And that's a long way from its peak of nearly $70,000, and that was only in November.
Now, we've talked a lot about the local market and how the year closed out. The final day, yesterday, didn't really help, did it?
No, Michael, it didn't. The S&P ASX 200 was down almost 2% to 6,568 points. The banks had an ordinary day. All of them were down between 2 and 3%. For a second day in a row, the worst performer on the bourse was Tyro Payments. It closed down about 6.2%, with investors still selling off the group following Wednesday's news that CEO Robbie Cook was heading over to Star Entertainment. PointsBet was the best performer, up 12.4%.
And Adam, on international markets, I thought US Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell made some very direct comments when he said that they would not let the economy slip into a high inflation regime, even if it meant putting economic growth at risk. It certainly seems the US Fed is determined to do whatever it takes to limit the risk of future price hikes.
Yes, Michael, it seems that way. And some of this, no doubt, is not only their actions, but selling the expectations that they want to have the market aware of. And just briefly, Brent crude oil is just below US $115 a barrel. Gold is at US $1,814 an ounce. The Aussie dollar has dropped below 69 US cents.
All right, big start. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Adam, Beijing has fired back at Prime Minister Anthony Albanese for suggesting that China should look at the lessons from the Ukraine conflict and distance itself from Russia. The PM made the comments at the NATO meeting in Madrid, where China has been formally declared a threat for the first time. He drew a comparison between Russia's invasion of Ukraine and China's ambitions for Taiwan, which provoked a pretty furious response from China.
Yes, Michael, and I think this is a really significant statement. Ill-informed is the word they used, saying that China has clarified its stance on Ukraine on multiple occasions and that Anthony Albanese is ignorant to not understand the status of Taiwan. It's all in an editorial in the state-owned media outlet China Daily that goes on to say that Beijing has, quote, displayed goodwill, end of quote, towards Mr. Albanese since his election win and was willing to improve ties, but it claims Canberra has not reciprocated.
Now, away from politics, Adam, Commonwealth Bank has gotten in early ahead of next week's Reserve Bank board meeting, increasing interest rates on a range of loans. The most significant increase was a massive 140 basis point jump for all fixed rate loans, covering both owner-occupiers and investors. One variable rate loan did have a reduction in rate by 0.15 of 1%, but that's only for new customers with a hefty 30% deposit. It's good to see, though, that Rate City, Adam, is reporting that both Commonwealth Bank and ANZ are going to lift the interest rates on certain savings accounts by 25 to 30 basis points.
Yeah, Michael, and you get the feeling that there's more rate hikes to come, and some of them could come very soon. Economists widely expect the Reserve Bank to hike rates again when it meets next week. Gareth Aird, the head of Australian economics at the Commonwealth Bank, is predicting a 50 basis point increase, which would take the official cash rate to 1.35%. This follows stronger than expected retail sales data this week, continued inflation pressure, and the recent 5.2% increase in the minimum wage.
And Adam, it seems the last two rate increases, a 25 basis point hike in May and then the increase twice that size last month, are having a pretty dramatic impact on the housing market. According to CoreLogic, Sydney prices fell 1.6% in June, while Melbourne prices went back 1.1%. The downturn's getting sharper.
It certainly seems that way, Michael. Growth in Brisbane has flattened right out to just 0.1% growth last month. The only standout now is Adelaide, with a 1.3% growth rate. Units are holding their value a little better in the bigger capitals. Across the quarter, Sydney house prices were down 3% compared to a 2.1% drop for units. In Melbourne, house values declined 2.4%, while units were down just 0.5% for the quarter.
Yeah, there's some better news in the regions too, Adam. The regional index posted a 0.1% rise in June. That's 2% over the quarter. It is a long way from last year's peaks, though. On Monday, we'll actually have a chat with Tim Lawless from CoreLogic about some of the trends in property at the moment, not just capital city prices, but the regions too, the rise in rents, the shift away from auctions. That's all coming up on Monday. Now, Adam, how about this for an incredible statistic?
Okay.
Yeah, I know you love your stats, so this is a good one. There is now 1.1 unemployed people in Australia for every job vacancy.
Wow.
It's pretty impressive, isn't it? That's compared with 3 times as many people before the start of the pandemic. The job vacancy data from the Bureau of Statistics really shows just how tough it is for businesses to find staff at the moment.
So in those numbers, we saw there were 480,000 job vacancies in May. 58,000 were added since February. 1 in 4 businesses say they had at least one vacancy to fill. That's 1 in 4, compared to just 1 in 10 in February 2020. The biggest surge in vacancies came from retailers, with vacancies up almost 40%. That's a good sign. But spare a thought for administration and support services. Almost 40% of companies reported job vacancies. Of course, this kind of worker shortage also puts pressure on wages, adding a little bit more to the inflation challenges.
It is just such a tight labour market at the moment. Victoria had the highest growth in job vacancies, followed by New South Wales. The official unemployment rate is still at 48-year lows of 3.9%. It'll be very interesting to see what happens in a fortnight when we get the next set of figures. Now, Adam, I mentioned this at the top of the show. It is also a very significant day, a special day for superannuation for 3 reasons. Compulsory super turns 30 today. So that's the first reason.
Oh, happy birthday, superannuation. You've been good to us so far. Long may that continue.
Seems like a very good excuse for cake, if you ask me.
Good idea.
The second reason it's a significant day is that the superannuation guarantee rises today from 10% to 10.5%. And the third, and by far the most disappointing reason, is that we are being warned to brace for super losses for the financial year just ended.
That's true, Michael. It's only the 5th time since compulsory superannuation began in 1992 that we can expect to lose money in our super funds. According to the Financial Review, research houses Super Ratings and Chant West expect superannuation options with 60 to 80% exposure to growth assets such as shares. They expect them to report an average return between -3% and -3.5% for the 2021-2022 financial year. Now, the majority of Australian super funds fall into that category, and they're typically labelled as balanced or growth funds.
Adam, the woes for Star Entertainment are continuing, this time with an inquiry into the casino group's Queensland operations. Queensland Attorney General yesterday announced that the former Supreme Court and Court of Appeal Judge Robert Gotterson would head the independent inquiry into the Star's casinos in Brisbane and on the Gold Coast.
Yeah, Michael, the inquiry will have the strength of a royal commission and the power to question current and former Star executives. In New South Wales, the Star only just finished closing submissions to a similar inquiry into whether it's suitable to hold a casino licence in Sydney. That inquiry saw the CEO and most of the board resign, with a new CEO announced this week.
And just quickly, speaking of New South Wales, Adam, late yesterday we heard former Deputy Premier John Barilaro has resigned from his newly appointed position as the New South Wales Trade Commissioner in the US, based in New York.
Yes, it was a $500,000 a year job, but his appointment to that position following his resignation from state politics has been very controversial, as another candidate had already been verbally offered the job. Hopefully, that's the end of this story.
Yeah, I agree. How about this one though, Adam? The Australian reports that Channel 7 has launched federal court action against Cricket Australia. This is in a bid to terminate its $450 million TV rights deal. Adam, you can certainly trust a TV network to produce a good drama, and this one, it seems, is going to play out in the courtroom.
Big numbers, Big drama, Michael. Seven has apparently filed proceedings alleging repeated breaches of its 6-year rights contract to broadcast Test cricket and the Big Bash League. The claims apparently relate to the, quote, quality and standard provisions of the deal, centering on the struggling Big Bash League, which has been hurt by a lack of big-name stars, particularly the internationals, being available to play in COVID-restricted environments. Seven has 2 years left to run on its deal, and now we'll see which party knocks the other one for 6.
Oh, yeah, okay, well done.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Moving on to overseas news, Adam, some good news for the Chinese economy, a jump in official non-manufacturing services in June. The sector is now expanding again following the lifting of lockdowns in Shanghai.
Yes, Michael, China may well be giving our Prime Minister a caution, but meanwhile, economists in New Zealand are warning the country will enter a recession next year, and that could be deeper than expected. Economists at the Bank of New Zealand say that ANZ's survey of business opinion is, quote, littered with indicators that fit with our view that the economy is headed into recession, end of quote.
Now, Adam, it's getting kind of hard to know what to make of the situation involving former US President Donald Trump this week. We spoke yesterday about the former White House aide who testified to the congressional inquiry into the January 6 attack on the Capitol. She told the panel that President Trump had demanded he be taken to the Capitol and had lunged at a Secret Service agent who insisted he, in fact, go back to the White House instead.
Yes, it's getting pretty murky now. Senior Secret Service agents are reportedly prepared to testify that the then president did not attack his security detail or try to grab the steering wheel of his vehicle. We'll have to wait and see who gets called to testify and where it all ends up. What a drama.
It certainly is. And finally, Adam, we're now seeing perhaps one of the unexpected consequences of lockdowns and everybody kind of moving their lives online. There has been a surge in digital romance scams. Bloomberg reports that there's been a major spike over the last 2 years, with banks and wealth management firms now rushing to keep up.
This is pretty sad, isn't it? And matters of the heart here, so it's very delicate. But data from the US Federal Trade Commission shows fraud losses on social media last year were 18 times higher than in 2017. Investment scams are still the most common, but romance scams have surged into second place.
All right. Now, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview with Daniel Hakim, the CEO and founder of the Club of United Business.
Michael, if you are a founder, a CEO, or ever aspire to be one, this is a really interesting interview. Think about the challenges that every business can face, and if you lead that business, how do you share those challenges and get through them? Find new clients, deal with growth, whatever it might be. This interview might give you some ideas.
All right, that's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Friday, the 1st of July, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you missed it yesterday, the new episode of Safe Word by Fear and Greed was released. It comes out every Thursday, and you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.